Hi folks, Sty North here. Well, a little chilly out today. This video is a VR to akdriller. AK started a series. This is the very beginning of his series called Storytime. And you know Sty, I do Sty stories, and somebody wants to start a video series called Storytime. I got my interest. Well, AK's series is what he's doing is every week or so he's throwing up like a 3-word question and asking people to tell their own story on that 3-word question. And this one is, have you ever exceeded 100 miles an hour in a vehicle? Any vehicle. Excuse me. Oh, that cold air hit me. I went out for my walk. It's right now it's 17 below with a 35 below wind chill. It's pretty chilly out there. And I just came in the door 5 minutes ago. So yeah, I'm all layered up. Long johns and fleece lined camel pants and a fleece camel pullover shirt. I still feel cold. Brr. That time of year. Well, if I'm going to do over 100 miles an hour today, it would have to be on a snowmobile because you just aren't going to get the traction you need out there today. We got about a foot of snow in the last 24 hours, so the roads are pretty snow covered. So let's get right to it. Have you ever exceeded 100 miles an hour in a vehicle? Well, I got to thinking about it, and I thought, oh boy, what a question for me. First thing I want to say is all the young viewers out there, when I tell you these experiences I had exceeding 100 miles an hour, don't go out there and copy me, okay? It wasn't safe then, it's not safe now. In a controlled, intentional, well thought out incident of exceeding 100 miles an hour, it's a lot safer. My stories, I probably should have never been exceeding 100 miles an hour, except for the very first time. Okay, I'm going to jump into my very first story. Well, the first time I exceeded 100 miles an hour in a vehicle, I was quite the young feller. I was just a kid. My father was the chief of police. He was the chief of police of a small community. And that community, he started out with that community as their town constable. He did that for many years. And then he became their first chief of police. And then they allowed him to hire 2 more officers. The one thing they didn't do is provide him with a squad car. He had to provide his own squad car. And then he would charge the city mileage for use of that squad car that he personally owned. Well, he had been through many squad cars. I believe his very first squad car was a 1956 Oldsmobile. Big old boat, you know. You see those old squad cars in the old black and white movies, you know. Well, I'm going to speed the clock up a little bit. He had purchased, at one time, he had purchased a 1963 Chevrolet Impala for a squad car, and he used it for a couple of years, and he wasn't too impressed with it. Well, in 1965, he just loved the Impala that they came out with, the Chevy Impalas. So he decided he's going to get a 1965 Chevy Impala to be the squad car. Well, in 1965, that was the last year they put the 409 big block V8 in Chevy Impalas. And only in the earliest models of the 1965 Impala. So he got an early model 1965 Impala in 1965 with a 400 horsepower big block motor in it. Now, that there were two versions of the 409. One I think was 350 horsepower and one was 400. He got the 400 horsepower motor. Well, he had it all tricked out though. Brand new car, and he takes it to a local hot rod shop. He has them build a custom set of headers for that 409. He put an exhaust cutout in the system so that if he needed to chase somebody, he could just pull a lever on the dash and it would cut the exhaust off at the headers, so he didn't have any back pressure on that motor, so he could get that much more power out of it. So he had fun tricking it out. He called it a sleeper. It was a sleeper. It looked like a standard squad car, black and white squad, but it had all this horsepower and a few tricked out features to it. Well, when he got the car, when they delivered the car, he asked the family, "Do you want to jump? You want to jump in and go for a ride in the new squad car? Let's go. Let's go take a ride in the new squad car." Well, nobody wanted to go except for me. I said, "Well, Dad, I'll go with you." And he says, "Well, good. At least somebody cares that I got a new car." And so I jumped in the car with him. And I said, "Where are we going?" He says, "We're going to go out of town a ways, and I'm going to take this thing out and see how it runs." I said, "Oh, that ought to be fun." Now, keep in mind, we never wore seat belts back then. It's just, most of the cars didn't even have seat belts in them. Seat belts, in fact, I think at the time were an option. They weren't mandated yet in 1965. And he had seat belts in that squad, but we never used them. But our town was about, maybe 3 miles long is all it was. 3 miles on the longest side of town. And we lived way on one end. And so we took off, and my dad, of course, he's cruising through town as slow as he can so everybody can see him in his new squad car. Well, we got outside of town, long country road. You could see 5-6 miles down that road. No real hills, a little wavy here and there, but no real hills and no curves. And he looked at me, and we're only doing about 30 miles an hour or so. And he looks at me and he says, "Hang on to your hat, boy, because we're going to wind this thing up." He pulled that exhaust cutout, and that car, it sounded, instantly I thought, "Oh man, we're at the track." It sounds just like a car at the track. He stomped on that car and it broke them tires loose, and it just sat there. I mean, we actually lost speed because the tires broke loose. And he had to back off on the accelerator to let the tires catch. And that car took off like a rocket. And I tell you what, it scared me to death. He had a custom dash cluster put in with a 160 mile an hour speedometer and a tachometer. You know, basically he had the dash remodeled more for a car on the strip than a car that you would drive as a normal car. Well, when he hit 100, he said, "Bingo, we're at 100," and it seemed like it was just seconds and we had hit 100. And then he started going 105, 110, 115. When he hit 125, he started backing out of it, and he goes, "Well, son, there's nobody in town that's going to outrun me anymore." So that was the first time I had ever been in a vehicle that exceeded 100 miles an hour. My pop had the biggest smile on his face. Yeah, he was pretty proud of having a squad car that would do 125 plus. I don't know if he ever got beyond 125 with that car. I haven't a clue. I do know that the word got out real fast. Don't try to outrun him, because he will catch you. Okay, I'm going to tell you the second time I exceeded 100 miles an hour, and then I'll wrap this up, because I could give you about 35, 40 times that I've exceeded 100 miles an hour. Second time, my pop passed away in 1969, and I was just still a young boy yet, and I got kind of a wild hair after he passed away. My poor mother, I just put her through the dickens, you know. And at 15, I was only 15 years old, I bought my first car. Now, I'm not going to go through the details of how I managed to get the title in my name. And I didn't have a driver's license. Well, my first car was a 1963 Thunderbird, Ford Thunderbird. They're kind of an ugly Thunderbird. They were unique. And it had a big block 390 in it. And here I am 15 years old, and I'm thinking in my head, well, my pop was able to take his squad over 125 miles an hour. I should be able to get 100 out of this thing. Well, I wound that car up, and shame on me, I had a girlfriend with me in the car out on an old backcountry road, and I wound that car up, and when the needle passed 100 miles an hour and started approaching 105, the car seemed awful light, like there was not much of it hugging the road anymore. And I was getting pretty nervous at that point. Just as I was coming onto 110 miles an hour, I had a ball joint in the front end go out. Not completely, but enough. I don't know if some of you viewers will know what I'm talking about. When a ball joint starts to go out, you get a front end wobble that'll throw you right off the road. That thing started a front end wobble at about 108 miles an hour. And as I decelerated, it got worse and worse and worse. And at about 55, the wobble was so bad that it actually threw me off the road. I went down in the ditch and fortunately didn't hit anything, and back up onto the road and got it stopped. And after that, if I drove it around, anytime I'd get right around 60 miles an hour, boom, that front end would start to wobble again. So that ball joint was shot, and I found out later that I was very, very, very fortunate that the ball joint didn't completely go, because it would have killed both of us. Neither one of us, of course, in seatbelts. Foolishness back then in the late 1960s, early 1970s. So there's a couple incidents where Sty exceeded 100 miles an hour. I'm going to throw one more in, and sorry, AK, but this doesn't involve a vehicle. But I think I exceeded 100 miles an hour. I have no way to prove it, but I think I did. Well, there was this young gal that for about a week, she kept asking me, would you take me out? I want to go to this one club. Would you take me to that club? Well, I was only 17 years old, and I had a really sweet car at the time. I had a 1969 Buick Electra with a big block in it and two-door. It was a sweet car. And Yeah, the girls liked to ride in that car. And finally I gave in. I said, yeah, I'll take you out to that club. So we went out to this club. Well, I was able to get us in because at 17, surprise, I had pretty much so the beard I've got today, right now. I had a goatee that was about as big as this one, and full mustache. And I looked like I was in my early 20s. And so I was able to go in any pub or any club. They never carded me. And I was worried they would card this gal, but no. As long as she was with me, they didn't even ask. Those were the days, huh? So we're in this club, and all of a sudden she says, uh-oh. And I go, uh-oh, what? And she goes, look at the door. And I looked, and here's this big fella. Now, I knew this guy, not personally, but I knew of him. And, oh, he's big. Yeah, he's about 6'4" and weighs about 285. All muscle and sinew, you know. Big farm boy. And I had heard he's just as mean as sin, and he didn't want to go nose to nose with him. And I go, what, that guy? And she goes, yeah, that's my boyfriend. I go, he's your what? And she says, that's my boyfriend. I said, you didn't tell me you've got a boyfriend. I would never take you out knowing you have a boyfriend. And she goes, well, we got in a fight, and I wanted to kind of get even with him, and I thought, if you took me out, then I could tell him, you know, and he'd get jealous. And I said, you are not using me for that. All of a sudden, I realized, there he is. He's coming across that club. His eyes locked on me. He wants a piece of me. And I thought, no, that's going to hurt. So here's my point. I think from that table we were sitting at to the back door, which was about maybe 65, 70 feet from our table, I think I hit 100 by the time I got to that back door. So that might be, I can't prove it, but that might be one of the times that Sty exceeded 100 miles an hour. Was getting the heck out of that club before that big farm boy got a piece of me. So there you go. There's my story time VR to AK Driller. Thanks, AK. Hey, folks, I'm going to put AK's link on the bottom for his page, for his channel. Go check him out. Give him a sub. He's great. You'll love it. But that's it. So this is Sty North on this VR. Check it out. And thanks, AK, for doing story time. Love it. You all have a nice day. Bye-bye.